Hi, I'm Nafisa Latic, and this is Across the Balkans. Today on the show, Montenegro's political crisis. After weeks of uncertainty, the conservative government lost a no-confidence vote in parliament. The motion was supported by the smallest bloc, black on white, and opposition parties, and boycotted by the MPs from the largest ruling bloc. Dritan Abazovic, the former deputy prime minister and leader of Black on White, tabled the motion. He says negotiations to form a new government have already started, and if they fail, the country could call early elections. The government has been under constant pressure since its formation because of the differences among the ruling parties. It's often been criticized for having close ties with Serbia and the Serbian Orthodox Church. Let's take a look at how the situation unfolded.
Some say it's the deepest political crisis in years, and Montenegrins seem more divided than at any other time since independence. But how did things come to this point? Back in December 2020, Montenegro got a new government, ending the ruling Democratic Party of Socialists' 30-year hold on power, and ousting longtime leader Milo Đukanović. But even then, people were skeptical. The ruling coalition seemed doomed from the start, due to huge differences between its small parties, which ranged from centrist and pro-EU to far-right and pro-Russian. Prime Minister Zdravko Krivokapić saw pressure to change the cabinet of technocrats from the very beginning. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The first breaking point came in June, when Parliament adopted a resolution condemning the Srebrenica genocide, causing division with the pro-Serb parties. Then, in September, violence erupted in Cetinje, the country's old capital, after opposition supporters and protesters clashed with police, trying to stop the new head of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Montenegro from being enthroned. Despite the massive protests, Joanikije II was enthroned with the help of police. The event stirred divisions within Montenegro over the country's ties with neighboring Serbia. Montenegro left its union with Serbia in 2006, but its church remained under the Serbian Church. Joanikije's appointment was seen as a sign of Belgrade's influence and showed once again Prime Minister Krivokapić's close links to the Serbian Church. In the meantime, reforms in the country have stalled due to constant disagreements between coalition members. On January 17, Deputy Prime Minister Dritan Abazovic, who also leads the smallest party in the coalition, United Reform Action, called for the formation of a minority government to overcome the political stalemate. As a result, Krivokapić's conservative government, often seen as pro-Serbian and pro-Russian, collapsed in a no-confidence vote on Friday.
Dakle, mislim da je vlada odradila svoj mandat do kraja. Neko će reći dobro, neko će reći loše. Ja lično moram reći da sam sa mnogim segmentima zadovoljan. Što ćemo, političke prilike su takve da možda nije moglo dalje, ali u svakom slučaju treba da budemo ponosni da smo uradili ono što je bio prvi cilj prve demokratske vlade, a to je da konačno građani Crne Gore vide da se promjene ovdje mogu desiti. Sad će svaki naredni put to da bude lakše i uz mnogo manje tenzije.
Previously seen as Krivokapić's right-hand man, the young ethnic Albanian politician quickly gained popularity in Montenegro. At the same time, the PM seemed unable to hold the coalition together and was accused by almost all of its members of failing to fulfill the coalition's pledges. Now it's on Abazovic and his partners to see if they can deliver what they promised, to form a government that can get Montenegro back on track.
My guest today is Zlatko Vujović. He is an assistant political sciences professor at the University of Montenegro and president of Montenegrin think tank, the Center for Monitoring and Research. Thank you so much for being our guest. So what happens now? What kind of government can we expect to be formed in Montenegro, and who will be part of it?
After the fall of the pro-Serbian government led by the Prime Minister Krivokapić, it is expected that the new government would be formed shortly. And this government is going to be something between, let's say, a minority, with the minority support in the parliament, but a combination hybrid model between the minority government and the technocratic government. So part of the political parties that are now forming, let's call it like that, the new parliamentary majority will participate in the government. And part of the ministers would be those that are not affiliated to any of the party. That is something that is expected, but it is not formally announced.
Right. And if we do have a new government, as you were saying, can it last until the next election that are due to take place in 2024 in Montenegro, or will this lead into more political uncertainty?
It is very hard to answer onto your question because we don't know who is going to form the government. There are two possible scenarios. One is to form, let's say, technocratic government that will last until the next presidential election next year. And then the possibility is to have the parallel presidential and parliamentary election. The another scenario is that this technocratic government would be transformed in something that would be the classic model of the political party, with the new minister from those parties that will not participate right now in that minority government.
Right.
When I'm saying minority government, I mean with the minority support, because the previously ruling DPS, led by Mr. Đukanović, will not have minister in the government, but it is expected that they will cover some positions that are lower than the ministry level.
Right. So how significant will actually be the role of DPS, the former ruling party that you are mentioning, and its leader that is now the current president, Milo Đukanović? What kind of role will they have during the negotiations about the new coalition?
DPS said very clearly that they are going to support the government, even that they are not going to have minister in that government. But it is expected, following the previous experience, for example, with the Krivokapić-led government, that those parties that are not having the ministers in the government, they are covering the lower position within the executive, like, for example, the head of the important institutions, the big companies, the deputy ministers, or something like that. So it is expected that they will cover those positions, but it's not expected that they will have the ministers. They will still be very influential, but not as much as it is expected from the party that has that gained 35% of the votes on the last elections.
Right. Many are mentioning Dritan Abazovic as a possible prime minister. The vice president of his party came out and said they would expect him to be the prime minister. Is this likely to happen? And if it does happen, what kind of what can we expect from him moving forward?
Mr. Abazovic has high chances to be appointed for the prime minister, but that is still not being decided. There are different rumors in the political community that are saying that maybe the other, let's say, candidates are for that position, but this is still to be decided, even that he has the highest chances of all other candidates. Right. The problem with Mr. Abazovic is that he has quite strong links with the officials in Belgrade, and there is a concern in one part of the current opposition, those who are supposed to support the new government, that he is going to be influenced by the Belgrade and the Serbian Orthodox Church, because in the first messages that he sent, he said that he will sign the basic agreement with the Serbian Orthodox Church, which is strongly criticized by the pro-Montenegrin parties, as it gives to the Serbian Orthodox Church status that is above the state, like a foreign state inside Montenegro. So this is that agreement, the content of that agreement is unconstitutional and illegal. So that is why there is the concern about the behavior of the possible new Prime Minister Abazovic. So if he wants to be the Prime Minister, he needs to give strong guarantees to the pro-Western and pro-Montenegrin party that he will not act against the national interest of Montenegro.
The Serbian Orthodox Church already said they will not support the minority government. I think just ahead of the no confidence vote in the parliament, they came out with that statement. And the former coalition and its prime minister, Krivokapić, were often criticized for this amount of influence the church had in Montenegro's domestic affairs. What kind of reaction can we expect from the church moving forward? And why is the church commenting on the political issues in Montenegro?
Prime Minister Krivokapić was chosen by the Serbian Orthodox Church to be prime minister. Serbian Orthodox Church had a very strong role in the campaign for the last parliamentary election. The priests were being part of the campaign. They were advocating, lobbying, and asking the voters to vote for the list of Mr. Krivokapić. Krivokapić was appointed for the prime minister, and he was following the instructions from the Serbian Orthodox Church. But the Serbian Orthodox Church has different groups within themselves, so it's not that they are fully monolith. So the part of the Serbian Orthodox Church that is active in Montenegro is strongly supporting Mr. Krivokapić and Aleksa Bečić. And they think that these two political options are their own political option. On the other hand, the Serbian Orthodox Church from Belgrade is controlled strongly by Mr. Vučić, president of the Serbia, is controlling Democratic Front. So sometimes there is unsatisfaction from the Democratic Front regarding the performance of Mr. Krivokapić. Right now, the Serbian Orthodox Church in Montenegro, they supported Krivokapić government, but the patriarch from Belgrade was quite hesitating to give the support to Mr. Krivokapić. So there is a rumor and let's say concern that there is agreement between the Serbian patriarch and the possible Prime Minister Abazovic regarding the basic agreement.
Right. So the divisions in Montenegro reached a boiling point. We've seen protests from both sides in the previous couple of weeks. Is the security situation under threat at the moment in Montenegro? And how difficult will it be for the new government to calm down the tensions we have seen in this country in the past year?
So the ex-speaker of the parliament, who was removed from that position yesterday, is announcing, his party and himself is announcing the protests and inviting the other political party, including Democratic Front, to join. So actually we are now witnessing the homogenization of the pro-Serbian parties in Montenegro, Democrats and Democratic Front together with Mr. Krivokapić, organizing the protest. The protest could be, let's say, could have a lot of people gathered there, but they could not be effective without the active support of the official Belgrade, Mr. President Vučić. When I'm saying that, I mean not only, media, because there is a huge interference of the Serbian media on political scene of Montenegro, but also technical and financial. Like it was the case in the local election in Nikšić and parliamentary election 2020. So let's see what is going to be the move of President Vučić. If he is going to intervene, then those protests will be stronger. But we should be also aware that the President Vučić is facing the new elections. Elections are on 3rd April, so he has a full of the hands of his own task and that he has to fulfill.
And just briefly, Zlatko, at the end, how divided are Montenegrins over whether to join the EU or seek closer ties with Serbia and Russia at the moment?
So regarding that situation is quite clear. There is almost more than 70% of those who live in Montenegro, they support the EU and the membership of the EU. But also the Montenegrin electorate is divided between those who feel themselves like pro-Serbian, pro-Russian, and that number goes from 30 to 45%, depending on which issue we are discussing. So this is something that with the strong influence of the Serbian Orthodox Church that is anti-European, anti-Western, and the pro-Russian. This is possible reason for concern, and sometimes those protests could be very aggressive and very radical.
Zlatko Vujović there for us. Zlatko, thanks so much for being our guest on Across the Balkans. It's time to take a look at some other stories making headlines in the region. Hundreds of people in Athens were out on the streets protesting against Greece's illegal pushback policy. Last week, Turkey said it found 19 frozen bodies close to the Greek border and accused Athens of leaving the migrants to die in harsh winter conditions after stripping them of their clothes and forcing them back across the border. Greece has denied the allegations, despite Turkish Defense Ministry said they had images of migrants without any clothes and shoes. The prize winner designer of the €1 coin in Croatia is withdrawing his design after claims that he had copied a published photograph of a Scottish photographer. Last Friday, Croatia has revealed the officially approved design of its euro and cent coins to be replaced with the national currency kuna at the start of next year. The frontal motif of the €1 coin was going to show the marten animal. Designer Stjepan Prankovic said he was withdrawing the design due to negative atmosphere in the media, as well as the pressure he was under. Opposition MPs blamed the government for running the design competition badly. Let's turn now to another political crisis in the region, the one in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Frustration is growing as Bosnia's leaders have once again failed to reach an agreement on election laws during talks mediated by the EU and US. The problem is in the implementation of the verdicts handed down by the European Court of Human Rights. According to the current law, citizens can only choose Bosniak, Serb and Croat candidates for the presidency. Many people see this as discriminatory towards minority groups or candidates who don't affiliate themselves with the three major ethnic groups. The EU and US diplomats in charge of Bosnia now say it is up to Bosnian leaders to reach a final agreement. Semir Sejfovic looks back at how the crisis escalated since the Dayton peace agreement.
An Ermine was killed on this corner here.
Well, I first came to Sarajevo in the summer of 1992, just after the siege began, because I was really fascinated by what was happening to ordinary people in this extraordinary situation. The exhibition that we're in here is an attempt to remind people of how brutal those attacks were. It looks at the legacy of Sniper Alley, which was this infamous term for the main street that ran through the heart of the city, which was constantly under sniper fire and shelling, and dozens of people were killed, hundreds were wounded. Some particularly tragic incident, obviously, that is dealt with in the exhibition of Nermin Divovic, who was a young boy who was killed by a sniper. The sniper bullet passed through his mother's body, wounding her badly, and then entered into his body and killed him on the 18th of November 1994. And that was right in front of a UN armoured personnel carrier that was supposedly protecting them from sniper fire. So the civilian population here was incredibly vulnerable and was in fact terrorised by the Serbian forces that were besieging the city.
The war in Bosnia and Herzegovina killed more than 100,000 people and forcibly displaced more than 2 million others. It was the bloodiest conflict on European soil since World War II.
Ja sam Vedran Drljević, civilna žrtva rata u Bosni i Hercegovini od 1992. do 1995. godine. Ranjen sam u olimpijskom naselju, općina Novi Grad, Sarajevo, krajem oktobra 1993. godine kad sam imao samo 10 godina. Padne granata, negdje u daljini čujem detonaciju i mislim prošlo je najopasnije i nastavljam ja ovdje da se igram sam, čekajući tu dvojicu prijatelja, oni se u međuvremenu pojavljuju i mi čujemo da je ispaljena još jedna granata. Misleći da će opet negdje eksplodirati dalje od nas, ona je tačno ovdje iza nas, nekih 50 metara, pala, strašna detonacija i počeli smo trčati prema ovom haustoru isprepadani od te detonacije i od tog adrenalina. Ja nisam uopšte znao da sam ranjen, dok mi ovi prijatelji nisu počeli blijedi govoriti ranjen si, tu u prijedjelu vrata i ramena. Došao je moj brat i onda su me odveli u Dobrinsku bolnicu i tu sam imao operaciju. Tu sam se nagledao svega, i ranjenih i mrtvih ljudi, operacija i jauka, i sad su mi te scene ovako vrlo svježe, dobro se sjećam toga. Poslije sat i po operacije su mi rekli da se ne može izvaditi geler, da će ostati u meni dok se rat ne završi, pa će onda probati i evo, 27-8 godina poslije taj galerije još u meni i podsjeća me ovako kad je promjena vremena, podsjeti me na tu 93. godinu.
Fighting was brought to an end on December 14th, 1995, with the signing of the Dayton Peace Agreement. But for victims of the war, wounds haven't healed 27 years later.
I tek sad iz ove perspektive kad vidim djecu koja su sretna, hvala Bogu, u miru, vidimo šta smo propustili. I ubijeđen sam u to da smo oštećena generacija. Danas kad gledam neke svoje prijatelje koji su prošli slično, oni imaju teške živote. Teške živote, to neko naziva PTSP, taj dječji ili ne znam, odrasli koji su direktno učestvovali u ratnim sukobima, su jako oštećene generacije.
The way the war ended, it didn't end, nobody won the war in Bosnia. And unfortunately, the Dayton settlement, it ended the war, but it ended the war in a way that actually reinforced the successes of ethnic cleansing and genocide. It kind of effectively rewarded genocide because Republika Srpska is founded on the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people and the expulsion of people from their homes. And that's almost set in stone in the Dayton Agreement. That's one of the great sort of tragedies of the legacy of the end of the war here, that the political system, written into the political system, is ethno-nationalism.
Many of those who were involved in establishing Republika Srpska in the early 1990s were later convicted for genocide, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity by a UN tribunal at The Hague. One of the men who negotiated the Dayton Peace Agreement for the Bosnian government, Ivo Komšić, warns of growing similarities in tensions between then and now.
Imamo ratne politike, one su aktuelne, imate stranke iz Republike Srpske na čelu sa SNSD-om koji negiraju Bosnu i Hercegovinu potpuno i u svim tim pregovorima oni bi bili za to da Bosna i Hercegovina nestane. Dakle, da se sa zelenim stolom uništi Bosna i Hercegovina, pobriše Bosna i Hercegovina, ono što oni čak nisu mogli ni ratom uraditi bez obzira na zločine koji su napravili. S druge strane, sa hrvatske strane imate također taj problem što se aktuelna politika HDZ-a ovdje u Bosni i Hercegovini nastoji da obnovi Herceg-Bosnu, da dobije, da se formira ovdje treći entitet, dakle da Bosna i Hercegovina ovakva kakva jeste sa dva entiteta ide u daljnju podjelu. Zbog tih ciljeva njihovih ratnih i došlo je do Daytona kao mirovnog sporazuma, jer mirovni sporazum je to zapravo sve anulirao. U Daytonu nema Karadžićeve Republike Srpske, nema Herceg-Bosne.
Most recently, Bosnian Serb politicians from the entity of Republika Srpska pulled out of all state institutions, blocking urgently needed reforms.
Politički predstavnici Republike Srpske i Srba u predsjedništvu, u Savjetu ministara i parlamentarnoj skupštini, odnosno obadvoma, neće učestvovati u radu i odlučivanju, dok se ne sjede i vidi na koji način se suprotstaviti ovome i anulirati ovo.
They're demanding that a law imposed by former international official Valentin Inzko, forbidding the denial of genocide, be annulled.
If you go through eastern Serbia, if you go to somewhere like Bratunac, there's still a lot of hostility and a lot of open celebration of convicted war criminals, and that cannot be allowed to continue. Genocide denial is a crime in any civilized country. Imagine if in Germany now somebody started painting murals of Himmler and Hitler and Goebbels and celebrating them as national heroes. Of course, it would be completely outrageous and people would ban it immediately and people would be arrested. So it shouldn't be a question of genocide denial being an issue in Bosnia.
Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik has continued to mock state and international institutions. He celebrated Republika Srpska's Unity Day in January with a military parade, attended by representatives of the Serbian Orthodox Church and government, the Russian ambassador, and the Chinese envoy.
Da kao mi ne možemo da slavimo 9. a mi kažemo da možemo.
The day was ruled unconstitutional twice by the country's top court, and its commemoration caused enough concern for a visit by American official Samantha Power, after new U.S. sanctions were imposed on the Bosnian Serb leader.
Leaders here are attempting to sow division and are not sufficiently focused on the challenges that affect the lives of ordinary people. President Dodik, in particular, has created a climate of tension, one that is vulnerable to miscalculation and the risk of escalation.
But the source of tension is not just nationalism, it's also structural.
Political blocs with a Bosniak Muslim majority are disunited and don't have the capacity to provide continuous governance without coalitions made up of Bosnian Serb and Croat nationalist parties, leaving the country in a constant state of negotiations and the lives of regular people in a constant state of limbo.
The political leaderships are, sadly, not all of them, but many of them very corrupt. And they're using the smokescreen or the mythology of nationalism and ethnicity and religion to stay in power, and so they can continue to exploit the resources of the country with their cronies.
And where nationalism blooms, corruption shines. Bosnia and Herzegovina is ranked 110th most corrupt country in the world out of 180 nations. It also suffers from a brain drain of its most skilled and talented workers who are leaving, not just to seek jobs, but who are fed up with the same fruitless political cycles ever since the war. Samir Sejfovic, TRT World, Sarajevo, Bosnia.
Thanks for watching this episode of Across the Balkans. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.